Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ajay's Analysis. It is your host, Ajay Cybulski. If you are listening on audio platforms after the show, I appreciate it greatly. Please keep those coming. Please like, subscribe to Buffalo Rumblings. I would very greatly appreciate that. Today, I am joined by two of my fellow coworkers. I intern with Cover One. I produce the Going Deep podcast, which is every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. Mike Bundt, Kevin Massare. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good, AJ. Thanks for having us.
Doing wonderful and excited to be here. Way to go for AJ's Analysis episode 4, 5?
Episode 5, I believe.
5
or 6. 5 or 6. We might be pushing 6, but
all right. Excited to be on one of the early single digit numbers.
Yeah, I am. So anyway, we're going to talk about some, obviously the big news today, Nyheim Hines, the jet skiing accident, what happened with that. It was pretty, I woke up this morning and saw the news and I was like, what the heck happened? And the knee injury off site. And then it kind of came out that Tom Pelissero reported that he was in a jet ski by himself out in the water or something. And another jet ski came by and hit him. And, he resulted in a torn ACL. He's getting surgery this week. Obviously, a loss for the Bills, I would say. I don't think it's like the biggest loss. I don't think it's like detrimental. I don't think it changes that much. But he was a guy that now we're going to have to worry about the return battle and what's going on there with that stuff and who's going to win that job. So first off, just your thoughts, Mike, I'll start with you on the Nyheim Hines injury, what it does for the Bills, and just how you feel about the whole situation.
I mean, first of all, it's horrible luck, and I feel bad for Nyheim Hines. That's just an awful break to have an accident while on a jet ski where he was supposedly just still in the water and someone comes crashing into him, and then to now be out a year, especially as a running back, you don't know how much time you have after an injury like this. Will he still have a career waiting for him once he recovers from this injury? Who knows? From a Bills perspective, it's disappointing, but it's not the end of the world. He did slot to be their starting kick returner this year. What would his role have been on the Bills offense? I think that was left to be determined. It wasn't a smooth transition when he was traded to the Bills last year. He said that it did take some time to pick up on the playbook, the route trees, stuff like that. Were they going to feature him more in the passing game this year? Possibly, but I don't know if that was a guarantee. I had him as a potential surprise cut, that candidate where I didn't think it was a lock that he was going to make the team, but still this obviously does hurt the Bills from a depth perspective. I know we're going to get into who do we think will take over the kick return job with him gone. But at the end of the day, I think this stinks more for Nyheim Hines in his future more than it does impact the Buffalo Bills.
Kevin, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, what's funny is it's a terrible situation, one where you don't want to ever have him taken off the field, especially with an incident like that. It's very disappointing. And, quite frankly, was interested to see how he'd be part of this offense. But just look at the contracts. I had him as one of the potential cuts of the Bills, especially if Deontay Hardy, who's been talked about for maybe taking over for a return. He was an all-pro punt returner. He puts the ball on the ground a little bit, but all-pro returners tend to do that. They do fumble at times. And I think that if they found that Hardy was able to do that successfully, I think you were going to save $1.5 million anyways. And now we're, looking into how much money this is all going to amount to be to give the Bills some cap space coming into the season. So he was on, maybe we'll talk about it later, but he was on my surprise cut list for sure, just due to the way the contracts are designed. You can keep Latavius Murray, who got a fully guaranteed contract, and I do believe that he was going to make the roster with that contract as comparatively to Nyheim Hines. I had some severe question marks with if he was ever going to be involved with the offense, especially with a few of the weapons that are coming in.
Yeah, Nyheim Hines is an interesting player. He came over in the 5th round or on in a trade from the Colts for a 5th round pick. I thought they were going to bring him in for those like short pass catching abilities that, those plays out of the backfield. That did not happen. He just tried to turn into that staple in the return game. One more thing about, the Nyheim Hines thing is that the NFI, the Bills can restructure the deal to like pay, while he's recovering, they could pay him like the minimum just to pay him while he's in recovery. But, as the rule states, there's no money going to Nyheim Hines in the contract Unless there's like some extreme circumstance, and this is an extreme circumstance. So it's kind of confusing. We don't really know how the contract is like detailed, but I bet, I don't think the Bills are just not going to pay the guy. I mean, it's just such an unforeseen circumstance unless, it was his fault. But as of now, it doesn't seem like it really was. So just that part of it, I think, they're going to save some money from it. It really is unfortunate. Mike, like you said, he was going to be I think he was going to be the return guy. Now, he didn't make my initial 53-man roster when I did one a couple weeks ago with Bruce Exclusive. And he wasn't on it, but I think as time went on, I was like, well, he does have a role on this team. I don't think the Bills like to utilize guys heavily in the offense and on special teams. They haven't done that in the past. So just an interesting situation, in total. And I think Hines, once he makes a return, will he be with the Bills next year? I don't know, but let's hope he recovers, heals up, and he can hopefully have a couple more good years in him of football. And this doesn't a career ruiner for the guy. Moving on. Go ahead. Moving on. So we're going to talk about who can take over this, potential kickoff return, punt returner kind of position for the Bills. Now, they do have a couple of guys in-house. They have Deontay Harder, who, like you said, Kev, was a 2019 All-Pro punt returner. He has had 7 fumbles on special teams in his career. So that's kind of concerning, but it happens. It's not like it's not a popular thing that happens amongst returners. They do fumble the ball. And then Micah Hyde, who's done it before on the hands team, like within the 50, on the 50-yard line, they got to catch it within the 10 or something like that. He has sure hands, so they do that. And then Khalil Shakir has a little bit as well. So those are like the 3 guys that I think could fill the role in-house. But I just want to pose the question to you guys. Do they go and get like an Andre Roberts, 35-year-old vet? Or like, do you think Hines is replaced and do you think they go and get like a free agent running back? I know they got Darrington Evans today. Or do you think it's like they're just going to get, Deontay Hardy, give him the job and, allow him to
I think ideally, AJ, that's what you wanted prior to the injury to Nyheim Hines, was for someone to potentially, who was on the roster, whether it's Khalil Shakir, whether it's James Cook, to take kick returns based on where he is on the running back depth chart. You mentioned Micah Hyde for punt, and then obviously Deontay Hardy's an all-pro punt returner. So you're hoping for the best in terms of one of those guys able to free up $1.5 million from cutting him previous to this injury guarantees, and then have another roster spot on this very deep roster, maybe for D-line, maybe for O-line, that you're going to be able to utilize, maybe for tight end, Quentin Morris or Sternberger, etc., that you're going to be able to utilize to keep a player on the roster. So not only could you save a roster spot, you would be able to potentially not lose a ton with the return game and save $1.5 million while doing it. That was probably always very interesting to Brandon Beane from a roster perspective. So I realistically think that you would have tried to find a solution, whether he was on the roster or not. And I think that you'll see initially Hardy take punt returns, and then, probably a couple guys mixing and matching, whether it's Evans or others mixing and matching at that kick return position to see if it's okay. And if it's not, AJ, I do think they go out and find a vet, maybe a guy that can do both, be a running back and return, like you kind of see at Darrington Evans. So that's kind of the plan I think they have in place. If it doesn't look good in July into August, I think then that's when they go ahead and say, all right, we need some reinforcements. Brandon will be the first person to go out and make that happen.
Yeah, I think right now they're fine with who they have on their roster. Deontay Hardy, I believe he was going to be the punt returner regardless of how things worked out with Hines. And now this injury happening to him just further cements that Deontay Hardy is going to be your punt returner to begin the season. He's an all-pro at that position. He's one of the better returners in the league. He had incentives in his contract already built in for having a certain return average this year, which would kind of show that they were already thinking about going that direction with Hardy to begin with. At kick returner, I think it's going to be Khalil Shakir, to be honest with you. We don't really know what his role is going to be on the offense early in the season. I think we know he has the ability to do it. Is he going to be great at it? Probably not as good as Nyheim Hines, but you're not expecting anything magnificent. You're just hoping that when he does return it, he takes care of the ball and that he can get you to the 25-yard line most of the time. I know there was the tweet from Sharp Football earlier today that showed how much of a difference Nyheim Hines made in the return game compared to the first half of the year when he wasn't in Buffalo. And I think it averages out to be about 6 yards more or 5.5 yards more per kick return, with a starting field position around the 31 compared to the 25.5. But and not to take away touchdowns, but when you have 2 kickoff return touchdowns, that's also going to slant the numbers heavily in your favor. And granted, you don't want to just take that away because they did happen. But at the, I think this is one of those things. The Bills will be fine with whoever they have at kick return. I know the Micah Hyde conversation has been brought up where he's returned punts in the past. I look at him as more of a sure-handed, he's fair catching things when you don't have someone to trust back there. I don't think this is something where they're actually going to consider Micah Hyde at punt returner when they have a guy like Deontay Hardy already on the roster.
Yeah, I would agree with you guys. So I'm going to move on to the Darrington Evans signing and the Jay Sternberger. Mike, I will ask you about Evans after I recap, and then Kyle will ask you about the Sternberger signing once I recap. So Evans, obviously the 2019 Offensive Player of the Year, top 100 pick in the 2020 NFL Draft. He has some return experience in college and in the pros. Has some interest, some injury history, and he's yet to have a touchdown in his career. Just an interesting note. I looked up his statistics, and he's yet to have one. But he wasn't a bad player coming out of college, and he has the ability, if he can stay healthy, to maybe fight for a roster spot. And then the other one, Jay Sternberger, had a really good year in the USFL. 517 yards, 7 touchdowns. Led the USFL. Coming out of in the combine, 4.75 40. Not crazy athletic. Like, I wouldn't say he's crazy athletic, but he had good production in college, and he had a good year in the USFL. So there's also potential for, something to come from that signing as well. So first, Mike, your thoughts on the Darrington Evans signing. Does he have a chance to make this roster, and anything else that you can add, to the conversation?
I mean, first thing you got to say is both of these guys did have potential coming out of college. So they're not no-name players that never did anything or never had teams believing in them in the past. You don't get drafted in the 3rd round without having some ability. Now, that said, Evans really hasn't done much in his limited amount of time in the NFL. Is he capable of making this roster? It's possible. Will he? I don't think I would be putting money on that at this point in time. He obviously is a good athlete based on his RAS score. He was a productive player at Appalachian State, where he ran for over 1,000 yards twice. I think he had 18 touchdowns his 3rd year as their starting running back. So this is one of those signings where you bring him in because you need somebody. This is more than just a camp body. This is a guy that will be decent when he comes to camp. It's not like some UDFA that you're just taking a flyer on. This guy's been an NFL player for 3 years. So Evans, we'll see how it plays out. Now with Sternberger, that's more of a question mark. He had an okay 2020 year. Obviously, he's coming off the time in the USFL. I really wouldn't expect too much from either of these guys, but sometimes this is what Bean does. When there's an opening on the roster, he likes to take guys that maybe were decently looked at in the past that just haven't produced for whatever reason at the NFL level. Sometimes other teams miss on guys, and you believe with your coaching staff, you might be able to find a hidden gem. So we'll see how it turns out with both of them.
Well, thanks for taking Sternberger from me, Mike. Anyways, a lot of people forget he actually scored an NFC Championship game touchdown in 2019. The Packers did release him after he served a 2-game suspension for violating the team's NFL substance abuse program. He also spent time with a bunch of other teams, which shows, to your point, talent: Seahawks, Commanders, Steelers. He played, like AJ said, he played with the Stallions. And led the league in the USFL with 7 touchdowns, 4th in receiving yardage. So he showed that he does have the chops. He was pretty good in pass protection in his limited time in the NFL. Also was good in yak. I mean, out of his career yardage, 65% of it was yak. So you could see that he is a natural receiver. He had some athleticism. His RAS came in at about 5, so he's above average athletically. So he does possess a lot. And then in his limited time, caught a big game touchdown. He's battling a lot. I mean, there's a chance that with Dalton Kincaid playing a little bit more slot, there's a chance that you're looking for a second inline tight end on the roster. Will it be Quentin Morris, who's kind of the same player as Kincaid, or is it going to be a guy who can play in line a little bit more? I think that there's a true battle that could be had there for that position, especially coming off of, yes, he dominated the USFL, but that can translate. Beating lesser competition can translate. Look at it. We're hoping to use this as a farm team going forward, the USFL and XFL. I do think that there's paths to spring games being farm teams in the future. So the Bills they're all over it. They were actually, trying out a lot of different players from the XFL and USFL. I'm actually shocked they actually went to kind of wrap it all up. I'm shocked they went with Darrington Evans when I thought there was a solid option there from the XFL who actually absolutely dominated the XFL. So that was an interesting decision to go with Evans. I personally would have liked, maybe to see Abram Smith a little bit, but that's the route they went. And it's interesting to see they were looking more for a true Nyheim Hines replacement, not just for maybe who's the better running back today.
Yeah, both great points. I think Sternberger that was my initial thought, because Quentin Morris has always been on the roster bubble. Like when I'm looking at the roster and trying to calculate who's going to be on the final 53, Quentin Morris, Reggie Gilliam, Cam Lewitt, those are all names that just kind of, they're always on the fringe, because I think there's a solid 47, 48 guys that I'm like, okay, they're going to make it. And then it's kind of four or five with 10 or 12 guys that I'm like, I just don't know if I can find a spot for them. So I think that with the, there's an extra roster spot now, obviously with the Hines thing, Morris and Sternberger, I think could be it might not be talked about and it might not really amount to anything, but if there's an injury to Knox or Kincaid throughout the year, I think one of those, whoever wins that battle, could play a role at some point in the season. So we will see. So we're going to now move on to training camp. Obviously the big topic, it is 2 days away. Finally, I think the players are reporting tomorrow, and then the practices start Wednesday. I will be there Sunday to Tuesday. I'm sure Kevin and Mike will also be there in attendance. So if you see these faces at Fisher, at some point in the next couple of weeks, say hi. So we're going to go. I'll go around the horn here. I'll start with Mike. We're looking at a dark horse candidate to make the roster. So a guy maybe that, he's one of those 10 to 12 guys that I was talking about just a couple minutes ago that maybe can make the roster, but maybe not. Mike, let's hear your dark horse roster candidate for the Bills 2023 roster.
Dark horse. Kevin hates when I do these dark horses. I don't.
Von Miller.
Let's have Kev go first, and I'll take a minute. Let's have Kev take over.
All right. So dark horse. I categorize it as two dark horses. I usually pick one guy that I think has a chance to, make the roster, but really well down, 80s to 90s range on the roster. For me, it's Richard Garage. He's a guy that I think played with two other players on this offense in Justin Shorter and in Osiris Torrance. He's a guy that knows, he's familiar with playing in this style of system. I think that Richard Garage could truly make an impact from the left tackle position. And in a year, really, he's not competing against too much. He's competing with some veteran right tackle swings. So I think that Garage has a chance to truly push for the roster at a unit where I'm just going to be honest, or I don't see a ton of competition above him based on where you put where you're going to see Tommy Doyle this year is probably inside. Where's Ryan Vandemark? But other than that, I don't know that there's a ton of competition for him. So he's my dark horse and already has played on a line with Osiris Torrance. So to me, it's very interesting that he could earn a spot there. And then another dark horse candidate, a little bit more likely to make the roster. But I'm going with Balen Spector. I think that he has not only a chance to make the roster, but he has a chance to compete to start. So I see him off of some roster projections, but he's definitely a guy that I think has a chance to do this. And then I like Christian Benford a lot. He's already on the roster, but I like him more as a dark horse candidate to maybe see some premier playing time, AJ.
Yeah, so taking it from there, Balen Spector would have been one of the guys I would have mentioned, just because not many people honestly think about him in even being part of the linebacker competition, being a late round draft pick last year, but they forget he is quite an athlete that has speed and the ability to cover. So that's a good one from Kev. And I'll say this, we were just talking about his competition, but I think Quentin Morris, I know he was on the team last year, but there's a lot of people that probably don't think the Bills need another tight end after drafting a guy like Dalton Kincaid. And I still think the Bills are going to keep a third tight end, because with what they're going to be running, 12 personnel, where they're going to have Knox on the line and they're going to have Kincaid in the slot, they're going to need someone as depth in that situation to fill in either position if necessary. So especially if Knox went down, who knows if they really want to force Kincaid to shift into the inline situation right away. They would probably rather have someone else take some of those responsibilities. So I'll say there will be a third tight end, whether Sternberger has a shot at it or Quinton Morris.
Great selections, Kev. I do agree with the Christian Benford thing. People, I still, I put an article out on, the Who Wins the CB2 competition. And it was like 80% Elam, but like there is a Christian Benford like fan club. Like there are people that think, amongst fans that think he does have a shot at the roster. And I think he does. Like he does. I really do. I think injuries plagued him last year. I think when he did play, he showed his tackling ability. He was decent in coverage. So I think there really is an opportunity for Christian Benford to win the CB2 battle. I think he's the biggest competition to Kaiir Elam. I think it's Elam's job to lose, but I do think Benford is right behind him. But my dark horse will be another guy who he may not push for the 50 or the CB2 battle, but it's Cameron Dantzler, free agent they signed from the Washington Commanders. He was actually released from the Commanders after a week stint, but just a little background on Dantzler, 2020 third round pick, started 26 games in his career. So he has the experience. It's not like an Alex Austin, who's a seventh round rookie who, doesn't have the experience in the NFL. Dane Jackson was a seventh round pick. I know that doesn't really matter, but Dane Jackson obviously is a staple in the scheme and what McDermott asked him to do. I think they like that out of Jackson, but I think he could be a potential trade candidate if a guy like Dantzler or Alex Austin can make a splash at some point. I think you get some value out of Jackson, a guy that's played snaps in the NFL. He's been opposite Trey White. He was CB1 last year when Trey was down. I know Kev's not a big fan of Dane Jackson, so I should probably stop while I'm ahead. But my guy is Cameron Dantzler, 2020 third round pick. They called him the Needle because he hit so hard and he's so skinny. That's like his nickname. He had a falling out with Mike Zimmer after his sophomore season in 2021. He ended up, losing his starting spot and then didn't get it back. And then in 2022 started like 9 more games for the Vikings, released after the season in March, picked up by the Commanders after the season, right after the Vikings released him in March. And then the Bills decided to pick him up. I like who he is. I like what he does. I think he can play. I mean, he has the talent. He was a PFWA all rookie. Pro Football Writers Association all-rookie team. So he is a guy that I really think he may not have a shot to win cornerback 2 battle, but I really think he can push for a roster spot, especially if you like what you're getting out of Dantzler. I'm telling you, Dane Jackson could be a train candidate, and you could get another extra draft pick out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a good surprise one, and he does have the starting experience, AJ. So that is something to look out for. The cornerback depth on this team definitely does go pretty deep with the squad.
And then last but not least, some surprise cut candidates. And then, if anyone in the chat has questions, I'll try and get to a few. But Kev, if you have to dip out of here, don't worry. You can go ahead and do that. Surprise cut candidates. We'll go opposite. So so Mike, you're starting. I don't care if Kev does not like your surprise, or I don't care if Kev has an opinion. You're starting. So let's hear.
And Michael picked the 90th guy on the roster.
So
I'll
cheat and I'll call this cut / possibly trade candidates, because I think all the guys I'm mentioning are guys that could be cut or traded potentially. Dane Jackson is one of them that I'll start out with. Obviously, he was one of the starting corners last year. Now that you presumably have Kaiir Elam taking over that spot, or at least the team wanting that to happen, and you still have depth with Christian Benford, you drafted Alex Austin, you have Cam Dantzler. Is there a need to have Dane Jackson on this roster? If someone's willing to give up a 7th round, 6th round pick, I say take it. And then 2 other people on the defense that would come to mind would be either Shaq Lawson or Boogie Basham. I think one of them is definitely off this team start of the regular season. I don't want to say either or, because some people are going to say, well, it has to be Boogie. it doesn't have to be Boogie. I mean, he was a day 2 pick. Yes, he hasn't had a good start to his career, but it is a position where sometimes it takes time. I'm not 100% convinced that Brandon Beane wants to give up on a day 2 pick going into his 3rd season. For that reason, I think Shaq Lawson could be the guy. Even though he's a good run defender, we've seen him be cut from multiple teams already. He was valuable last year, but I don't think that's a lock for him. So if they can't get a pick in return for Boogie Basham, I think Shaq Lawson becomes the more likely guy to be cut in that scenario, just because of value to the organization, what they've invested in him. And I'll say one more person. I think Tyrell Dodson, depending on what goes on in this camp, could be a camp casualty at the end. He needs to win this starting job. If he goes out there and is beaten by Terrell Bernard or Balin Spector, then what's the point of keeping him around still? If he can't beat out a pair of second-year players that the fan base is relatively low on overall, I'm not saying that the Bills are, I think Dodson could be a guy that could be in some jeopardy, even though right now he is in the battle to win the starting position.
Mike or Kevin's camera has turned off. We're having some technical difficulties, it looks like. So while he maybe figures that out, I am going to give my surprise cut candidates. I went a different route, Mike. I think Terrell Dodson is a virtual lock to make this roster just because of the fact I think he's the leader in the clubhouse right now to win the middle linebacker position. Do Bernard and Williams probably start games there this year? Yes. But like I said, I think there's enough talent around, Dodson, whoever that middle linebacker is, where they can masquerade that. And he doesn't have to ask to, do too much in the scheme on the defense. There he is. So he's one of mine, AJ Klein. I think there's an avenue where he just doesn't. I think they brought him back on a cheap contract. I think he has shown flashes, but he's old. He's getting older. The tires are getting worn out. So I would not be. It's a surprise cut, I think, because I think a lot of fans and people think they brought him back to be that like veteran depth kind of guy in the linebacker room that can teach Williams and Bernard how to play the position or give them advice. But I just could see him being expendable if, Spector and all these guys, the young guys, show out. And I think Dodson, I think Dodson has the edge on Klein just because he's younger. I think he's played more meaningful snaps. And then my other surprise cut candidate, I'm going to stick with the defensive line. Mike Bundt mentioned it. I'm going to go Boogie Basham. I think Kingsley Jonathan has a chance to make this roster. Like right now, Kingsley Jonathan would not be that big of a shock to me. I think it would be a little surprise, but I think Kingsley Jonathan has a shot. Eli Anku, I think Tim Settle could be expendable as well. Like he could be a surprise cut, but is he really a surprise cut? Because I feel like that's kind of been the narrative. Is Tim Settle could be a guy that's either traded or released. And then AJ Epinesa, Shaq Lawson, I think those guys are locks. But you look at that whole defensive line room, there's just so many pieces there. And I just have not seen enough from Boogie Basham. Whether it's – I know he hasn't gotten the opportunity, but even when he has, he's had some moments, but it's just not there for me. And with, all these guys that are in the defensive line room that I think Shaq Lawson is a virtual lock just because of his run presence, his leadership. I think that they value that. They've shown that in the past. They re-sign AJ Klein. They bring guys back to be – those veteran leaders. And Shaq Lawson can play. He can set the edge. He can get to the quarterback once in a while. So those are my two. And my dad has a question in the comments here, so I'm going to ask you right now. Who has more receptions and yards this year? Hardy, Sherfield, or Shakir? I'll start with Mike and then go to Kevin.
Hardy. He's gonna get the ball a bunch this year. They didn't bring him in on that contract to just be a punt returner. They're more than doubling what Isaiah McKenzie was getting paid. They immediately said once they brought him in, it's to replace the role that Isaiah McKenzie used to have. And then a few days later, McKenzie was cut. So to me, that's a pretty simple question, assuming that Hardy stays healthy. I guess Shakir could step up. Sherfield could step up. But I already see a defined role for Hardy. Well, I think Sherfield and Shakir are battling for a role right now on this team.
Kev, you can do two at once. Give me your surprise cuts, and then you can answer the who has more
Yeah,
receptions.
I think you guys covered a bunch of my surprise cuts, but one that I think could be thought about if you check out contract status and you check about other things. We have to see him healthy. He's going to start the season on the PUP is Jordan Phillips. The contract states that he's eligible to be cut and the Bills would save some money. So if someone like DJ Dale or Eli Anku is able to win that job and be paid less, I don't have him guaranteed on the roster. I need to see him play. He's consistently hurt and he's playing through injuries. He hasn't been good in many years. I need to see if he's able to do it for a full season, or if someone like DJ Dale, or if they want to utilize it on Kingsley Jonathan, a guy that can pop in and out, Kendall Vickers, Eli Anku, a couple other guys that they have shown to like. So I believe he should be safe, but a surprise cut for me is Jordan Phillips. I'm not 100% sure that he's going to waltz his way to the roster, especially if he continues to have these injuries and he starts a PUP, starts slow, comes off, doesn't look good. Will they try to move him? Will they try to do something with his contract? Bills will save some money cutting him off of that list. So just pay attention to Jordan Phillips. Either he's totally fine and good to go, which is great, or will he be in this camp casualty and save the Bills $1.6 million being cut? Someone to watch out for. But originally this segment was set for Nyheim Hines for me. But if you look at from that question perspective, I'm going with Sherfield. I think that he has an inside track to be on the field more often than not with his run blocking, elite run blocking ability, elite ability to play inside and outside, and already having some really good rapport with Josh Allen. We'll see if that translates or if that's a nothing burger. But I think I like the ability of what Sherfield can do over Hardy, and he might be on the field a good amount in a lot of different situations. So that might get him some surprise catches as well. But for going with pure receptions, I do think that Hardy will be a yak guy, a guy that might make some big plays. I think, though, the question was pure receptions, and I think that could go for Sherfield in this case. Shakir has a battle going upwards, but I think that there's possibility that maybe he has a great camp or there's an injury. But right now I'm picking Sherfield. I think that he is the slot that they're looking for. We'll see what it amounts to, as Beans already called Hardy more the receiver 4. So we'll see how this all plays out, or if this is negligible when it's really just Kincaid grabbing up all these slots.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you, Mike. I think Hardy will lead the pack, but Kevin, I also could see a path where I would go Hardy, Sherfield, Shakir. And I have a follow-up question for both of you after this, actually, real quick. But Hardy, for me, is just the guy, like Mike said, they paid him money. He's not just going to be a punt returner. He has the yak ability. Like I've always said, just watching Hardy and what I've seen from him, watching film or highlights and stuff like that, his game sense, he's just more aware on the field. He's a better route runner than McKenzie ever was. He's not just, running, using his speed to beat guys. He's using actual, he's getting to his stem and being deceptive and stuff like that. So that is what Hardy can do that McKenzie couldn't. And then Sherfield, just his presence in run blocking, his ability to play special teams. I think the Bills, the Bills coaching staff likes that out of their players. And Sherfield, Josh Allen spoke highly of him, like Kev said, at OTAs. So there is a route for both of them. And Sherfield showed that he could play valuable reps behind a Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and still produce and be a guy that Tua could look for in Miami. So there's also that avenue. Last question for you guys. Is there any chance, I know I'm going to pose this question, you might be stunned, but Khalil Shakir, I think he's a roster lock, but is there any avenue where you could be like, okay, he struggles on special teams because that's what he did last year. They said he had to work on that. His run blocking wasn't that great last year as well. So is there any avenue where Khalil Shakir, I know it's a second year and I don't think it'll happen. Maybe he's put on the practice squad, but Desmond Patman or Isaiah Coulter or Keyshawn Johnson, Marcel Aitman, Jalen, Shavers, any of those guys, do you think of if there's anyone of those three who's the most likely to maybe, I don't know, sit on the practice squad? Because I think Hardy and Sherfield are locks. Maybe Shorter's a guy that could slip beneath those guys, but I could see Shakir, I know he has the depth and he has the versatility. He can play boundary, he can play slot, but I'm 99% sure Shakir's making the roster. I'm just posing, is there any avenue of any of those depth receivers to make this roster?
No, I don't think so. AJ, I don't believe that there is going to be one just with his roster control, his salary. Actually, you're going to pay more to Marcel Aitman. If you had a UDFA like Wayne or Shavers, but I think those are the guys you're looking. Those are your practice squad guys. Those are the guys you're looking to sneak through. Shavers is said to be a delete special teamer. We'll see if that's true. I'm interested to see. So that could always play up here. But as far as Patman, or Aitman from the spring leagues, or Keyshawn Johnson, I don't necessarily see it. if Shakir stays healthy, he'd have to have a well thought out, like all of us in the room would say he's cut. That's how bad his summer was. I don't even know how you get to that level, but you could. Like, he's playing preseason games, he's dropping, he's fumbling, he's struggling. Sure, I think there's a path for really anyone outside of your top 10 guys. There's a path for the other 80 somewhere that could do something that would get him cut. But with his rookie control, I don't think he'd sneak through the practice squad. He'd get claimed by a bad team. I don't really see that needing to do that. I think you'd rather throw any of those other guys you named, Shavers specifically, maybe Wayne, through to the practice squad and then develop them that way and call them up if there's ever a need. And Shakir isn't getting it done. But I think Shakir probably has a better chance of being more valuable than we're saying and not necessarily being cut. So I think it's, now right. We might be undervaluing him, if anything, and maybe he trots out week one as the guy that has the most experience with Josh, and it's not Sherfield.
Right. I think we are all undervaluing Shakir, to be honest with you. Like, I'm not willing to say he could be the number 3 guy, but I think he's closer to being the number 3 guy than he is to getting cut anytime soon. I think a lot of us are forgetting how much they ramped him up in the playoffs. He was a drop away in the Miami game from having 100-yard game in the playoffs. And yes, they didn't have total confidence in him late in the season when they brought in John Brown and Cole Beasley. But I do think there is expectations of him being a contributor on this team going forward. Maybe it's not a big role this year, but I do think they think that Shakir is going to be part of this offense year 3, year 4. And I would even go further and say, when you look at this entire Bills roster, there is more locked in spots this year than maybe any Bills roster that we've had in the last 5-10 years. I really don't even think half these battles are worth even talking about near the bottom of the roster, just because with the way Bean went out and attacked free agency and brought in depth pieces and then drafted depth pieces, you already basically have a lot of your decisions made for you. You look at safety room, like your backups are going to be Hamlin. You're going to have Taylor Rapp. The corner room, we're talking about battles between Dane Jackson, Cam Dantzler, and Alex Austin. But you have pretty good players there. Even the defensive line, when we're talking about Shaq Lawson or Boogie Basham or Jordan Phillips being surprise cuts, that you already have pretty solid guys in front right there. So at the end of the day, I don't think there's really going to be a lot of, oh, you made a horrible decision cutting this guy, or you got to keep this guy. However it plays out, I'll be okay with. And I know that some of us have some disagreements. Like, you think Boogie is the guy that'll be gone, while I think maybe there could be a surprise cut. What I will say is, I don't think Bean is as high on the Phillips, Klein, and Shaq Lawson as what fans are on either of those guys. I think what Bean looks at those guys is cheap veterans that have familiarity with our team, our coaching staff, and our core players. And if they're willing to come here for next to nothing, we'll give them a shot to try to earn a roster spot. And if they don't look good, all right, see you later. Good luck getting another job somewhere else.
Yeah, I would agree with you guys. I think you could even say Khalil Shakir is closer to wide receiver 3 than wide receiver 6. That might be a stretch, but that would be a good debate. What is he closer to, wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 6? I think Shakir has every chance of being the wide receiver 3. Although I just like the versatility that Hardy and Sherfield bring. Shakir can't play boundary and slot, but I think Hardy can contribute, like you said, special teams, jet sweeps, quick routes over the middle, all that stuff. Sherfield, run blocking, all that stuff. So yeah, that was a great conversation, guys. I appreciate you coming on. This is AJ's analysis. And I am looking forward to, and my dad with another question. Would you bet money on Gabe Davis surpassing 1,000 yards for the first time in his career? Yes or no answers?
No.
I'm going with yes, because he would have last year if he would have played healthy.
I'm going.
Can I give a quick sentence? I'll say no, because you now have Dalton Kincaid on this offense, and there's not going to be a need to force feed him as much as you might have needed to last year.
Okay. I'm going to go yes as well. I'm going to agree with Kevin on this one. I think he does have the opportunity too. I'm higher on Gabe Davis than most people. I know he has the drop issues and stuff like that, but we've been going down that road all offseason. Let's actually finally see it. Training camp 2 days away. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Kevin. Make sure to check out their podcasts. Going Deep podcast on the Cover One Network every Tuesday nights at 7. All of you listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, I appreciate all the listeners, not viewership, because you can't view a podcast, Mike. So thank you for the listens, all the support recently, and I will see you guys next Monday. I will be in Rochester, maybe a little live show. We'll see about that. I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you.